To get started on this portion of the project, you should have already finished the mystery arm going in to grab the ball and replacing it with a bomb, and then animate the wick move down on the bomb as well. What we're going to be animating now is the upper portion of our baseball player. Now, to give you fair warning, this part is going to be tedious and does take some time, but for the most part, once you get down the concept of what we're doing for each individual part, essentially you should be able to work on your own to take it one part at a time. Although in the video I will show you my step-by-step process, and there are some difficulties within each one. So if you get stuck on something, I'll show you how to work through it. Now I'm going to get started by going down to the timeline and find the cleanup folder and turn off visibility for everything that we see. We only want to work on the parts that we, one part at a time. Now with visibility turned off, the first thing that we want to be able to work on is going to be the head. So find the head layer, turn on visibility for it, and let's unlock that layer as well. Let's select the very first frame. Now the movement for this head is going to start around frame 160. So going forward, you can see here's the movement for each one. And it's pretty much going to give you the entire movement of all the body parts, and the rough animation is animating on the twos, which means it's animating every other frame. So we're going to start our animation at frame 161. This will be our starting point for his position. So find frame 161, and on that layer, let's insert our first keyframe. You can then step forward 2 keyframes by hitting the period key twice, 1, 2. This will take you to the next frame on the rough animation and insert a keyframe there. Then simply repeat the process. 1, 2, hit another keyframe, 1, 2, insert another keyframe. So on and so forth until you've done all of the keyframes for the movement of the body. So here you can see all of our animation is simply going to act between frames 161 to frames 183. Now let's go back to frame 161. I'm going to zoom in on my head, and all we need to do is to move forward each keyframe and have the head move into position and rotate it where it needs to be. If it's off by a little bit, that's okay. But simply repeat this process for each of the different keyframes. Now at this point, if you are following along in the book, I am deviating with what the book would have you do. In the book, they would have you track the progress of the movement of the head, then create a motion guide to guide the head as it moves across. To be honest, that's a bit overkill for what we're trying to do, so I'm suggesting that we not do that particular part. Instead, simply because we're doing a motion movement and rotation of the head, all we have to do is a simple classic tween between all of these frames. So selecting the first one all the way to the second to the last one, you can right-click on all of those and do a classic motion tween, and it gives you the exact same results for doing a frame-by-frame of the movement of the head. Let's back out so we can see it. Now, if you want to test your animation and have it loop through this sequence, this is where I'll turn on my little looping guide. When you turn on the looping guide, remember it'll give you 2 little arrows, and we can set that between the boundaries of where we want to loop, and then all I have to do is hit the return and it'll automatically loop for us. And this is what it should be looking like. With that done, I'm going to go back to my head layer and I'm going to lock it down, but I'll keep the visibility on. The next thing we want to work on is this left sleeve. To do that, I'm going to go back to frame 161 and let's go down to our cleanup layer, turn on visibility for that sleeve, and unlock that layer. This is the layer that we want to be able to work on. We can select frame 161 on this layer, and just as we've done with all of the frames for the head, we simply need to rough in our keyframes first. So with that one, I'm going to hit F6 and create a new keyframe. Step forward 2 more, create a new keyframe. Step forward 2 more and create a new keyframe. Repeating this process to fill up the rest of the area. Now let's take a moment to look at the two different shapes that this left sleeve is going to move into versus its final form. Notice that it will transform a lot from this rounded area to this very straight and narrow area. So to make these kind of transformations, we have to do a little bit more than a simple classic tween. So to do this, let's go back to our very first keyframe, in this case frame 161, and I'm going to zoom in to my left sleeve. We want to change this from an object into a simple shape. So with that, I want you to right click on the sleeve and choose Break Apart. Notice that this will turn it into the normal drawing mode, and it should show all the little dots with it. Now as you step forward, you can move the next one into place. We'll grab our free transform tool and rotate it. But just remember, before you move on to the next one, right click on it and choose Break Apart to turn it into a shape. This will allow us to go to the previous frame and create a shape tween between both of those. Slowly as it moves, I'm also going to start to transform it. So let's put it into there. Move to the next one. Rotate our symbol into place. These first couple of frames are going to be relatively the same shape, so we'll keep that nice and good. Break apart. Move to the next one. Place it down, rotate it, break it apart. It's by frame 175 that we start to see the shape of the sleeve really start to transform. So from here, I'm going to place it into its position just by roughing it in. Then, once I break it apart, we'll choose Break Apart. I'm going to use my black arrow selection tool to start to transform and tweak this. So I can click on the edge. For instance, I want this upper portion here to match the corner that's up here. Hold down the Option key as you click and drag, and this will give it a much sharper edge. You can have it transform up to here. Let's do the same for the bottom of the sleeve down here. Hold down Option as you click on this edge and drag it down. Now it doesn't have to perfectly match. I'm letting go of Option now. But you should be able to click and tweak each one of these individual lines to move it right, nice and into position. So to get those tough corners, hold down Option, click and drag. But to simply click on a line, you don't have to hold Option. You can click and move it up into position as well. While I'm here, I'm going to go down and let's go ahead and create our shape tweens for frames all the way up to 175. So selecting all of those, choose Shape Tween. We can go through now and test out to see what it looks like. Now on some of these, you can see if there's some sort of distortion between both of those, we may have to go back and add some shape hints. I can definitely tell there's a transition or an issue transitioning from here. Now, if this is the case for you, if you've got some parts that simply aren't transforming correctly, don't worry about changing it now. Let's go ahead and move forward and making all the transformations. Then we'll go back and clean it up. With those all done, let's go back down to our keyframes and finish out the rest of the shape tweens for all of these. Now let's go through and see which ones need some help cleaning up for all the different parts. We'll back out to the very first keyframe. Let's go back down to this one. So I'm going to step forward one bit at a time. This one seems okay. This one seems okay. All the way till we get to here. So obviously there's some transitioning just really for one frame that needs to happen between both of these. Now there's two different ways we could clean this up. We could go through and add shape hints, or we could go through and add an individual frame and clean it up ourselves. Let me show you the process for both of them. If you want to work with shape hints, so for instance, this one's messing up in between both of those. So I see it starts on frame 171. There's my trouble one right there. So on frame 171, we're going to modify the shape and add a shape hint. Notice Shift-Command-H is the keyboard shortcut. You're going to need at least 4 of them on each side. So I'm going to put one down here at the very bottom left. Shift-Command-H. Let's do one on the bottom right. Right about there. Shift-Command-H. Let's do one at the top left. Shift-Command-H. Let's do one at the top right. Bottom, bottom, top, top. And just for good measure, I'm going to put one in the middle for both of each of these as well. Shift-Command-H. Middle, middle. So remember that sequence. We went left, right, left, right, left, right. Top, bottom, top, and then back to the middle. There we go. So from there, let's go back down to our timeline. I'm going to go to my next set of keyframes where it should end on, and this will give me my little shape hints, but we need to work backwards. In this case, I'll do it on the right first, then the left, then the top right, top left, then bottom right and bottom left. In other words, we want to put them back in the same position. We just need it to be nice and, yeah, there we go. Nice and in the same spot. Cool, that'll work for there. Now as we step backwards, well, in this case, you can see it's actually getting a little bit worse. It's transitioning it, and it's definitely not working. Sometimes shape hints just don't work out. So if this is the case, let's go back to our original position and let's remove those shape hints. Go up to Modify, Shape, and let's remove all of the shape hints. You can see they're removed from our original as well. If this is the case for you and the shape hints aren't working out, it may actually be easier to do a frame by frame in between each one of these. Here's how I would do that. Go to your original frame, this one right here, select the shape. In this case, you can see it's outlined, and let's do a copy of it. Edit and copy. Then go to that one frame that's in between both of these and hit F6. This will insert a keyframe here, and we're simply going to replace what's in between this one. So I'm going to delete it away. I know that it needs to be moved over, so I'll go up to Edit. Let's paste it in the same spot. But in this case, I'll choose my selection tool, and I'm going to drag it over and do a simple modification. Now, if I need to, I can turn on onion skinning, and I'm going to set it to one frame before and one frame after. This way I can see what it was before and where it is here. And then all I need to do is to place my keyframe somewhere in between both of these movements. So it's slightly rotated, and it's a little bit more narrow. It's only lasting for one short frame, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% perfect. If I turn off my keyframing, or excuse me, my onion skinning, I can now step between both of those and you wouldn't be able to tell a difference. Let's do the next one. So that one looks okay. This one looks relatively okay. I can tell that there's something going on with this upper portion. So if that's going to happen for me, maybe for this one, let's try the shape hints just to make sure it works out okay. So for this one, we'll choose our starting point. We'll insert a shape hint. In this case, it's just this upper portion. So I'm going to do Shift-Command-H. Now I'll do a shape hint right up here. We'll move forward 2 frames to the second one, and we'll put a shape hint right up here. Now when I go backwards, still not doing it, let's add another shape hint. So Shift-Command-H, we'll do, here's B, and I'll do Shift-Command-H, C. We'll set it to that little corner there. Move back forward to there. Let's add our shape hint to correct this one. Cross your fingers. Still not doing it. So in this case, I think shape hints aren't going to work. I'm going to do a frame by frame just to modify it and tweak that one little pit. So go up to shape, remove all shape hints, go in between. We'll insert a new keyframe there. And then for this one, all I'm going to do is modify this edge. Hold down Option, and click and drag up. And move it in. You can see shape tweens take a lot more time sometimes, and it's just easier to do a frame by frame. Then move up, that one looks okay. Move into position. This one's obviously off by a good bit, so I'm going to insert a new keyframe, F6. And then I'm going to do a simple modification to this one. Hold down Option and place it where it needs to be down here. So now it's transitioning up to here. Let's go through, we'll back out, let's play through and see what that looks like. So as it moves up, so far so good. You can go through and clean up as much as you need as long as it's transitioning and working well. Now keep in mind, your rough animation is animating on the 2s, and so we're animating every single frame. So your arm is actually going to have more frames and more movement than the rough animation. Sometimes it's difficult to remember that, so as you draw, make sure you're drawing either in between or right on what the rough is showing you. With this part done, let's go back down to our sleeve. We'll keep its visibility, but let's lock it down, and let's turn on that bicep layer. Bicep left, and we'll unlock it, and let's return back to frame 161. As we've done with all of the other ones, we need to go through and step and add all of our keyframes for the movement of this bicep. Go in, hit F6, move forward 2, F6, insert a keyframe all the way to finish it out. With that done, let's return back down to frame 161 and move forward each keyframe and modify this elbow and as it moves into place. So down and rotate, move forward, move down and rotate. Repeat this process to place it exactly where it needs to be based on the rough that's there. Now, as with the sleeve, if you look at the position of the elbow for these last couple of frames, you can see that it's going to start to cause some issues with the forearm as it rotates in. Mainly this particular part of the line is going to get in the way of the arm itself, and it's not going to connect to the elbow really easily. So what we want to do on these last few frames, I'm going to go back to frame 179. Starting here, I'm going to break it apart and erase away different parts of that line. So from here, we'll break it apart. There it is. Choose your eraser tool and simply erase away that portion of the line. Now we're going to connect the arm to the elbow, so don't worry about erasing away the elbow. Then you can step forward one frame. We do need to add a new keyframe here because we're going to do a frame by frame for these last few parts, and simply move it up to connect back to the where it needs to be for the sleeve. Moving forward to the next frame, right click on it, break that apart, choose your eraser tool and simply erase away out that elbow portion or this top portion here. That looks good. Step forward one keyframe, then move it kind of up into position here, and step forward one more keyframe. This will be the last one. We'll also break it apart, grab your eraser tool, and erase away this upper portion of the arm right there too. Now you can go back down to your timeline, and let's add some simple classic tweens all the way to these frames. With this done, do a classic tween, and let's check our animation to make sure it looks correct. We'll back out, go down to our original, and just kind of roughly seeing that it is moving forward correctly. Can hit return and test it out. Great. Now let's connect the forearm to the elbow. Going down to our timeline, we'll lock down that bicep left. Let's scroll down and try to find the forearm left. We'll turn on visibility and unlock it. And we'll go to our 161st keyframe, and let's insert all of the keyframes necessary for this part of the arm as well. So hit F6, move forward 2 keyframes, insert a new keyframe, so on and so forth. Now we'll return back, and just as we've done with the other arm, let's step forward each keyframe and select the forearm and rotate it and move it into position. Now this forearm is going to be moving in perspective, so every once in a while you will need to be able to change the size of it. Remember, if you hold down Option when you click on one edge, this will allow you to adjust just that edge itself. Step forward to the next keyframe, let's rotate it. The other thing that I'm looking for this arm is to make sure the lines match up in a natural way. So having the elbow connect within that forearm is what I'm really looking for. Move forward. Again, rotate it. And then place it. Hold down Option as you click and drag one edge, and that will resize and reposition it from that edge. Repeat this process for each of the different keyframes. With that all done, now we can go back down to our forearm, select the first keyframe all the way to the second to the last, and let's insert a simple classic tween. This will move each of the forearms, but what we want to check on is to make sure that they're connecting with the elbow for each individual part. So going back to frame 161, let's insert our period and step forward each individual frame to make sure there's no awkward breaks. For instance, I can see there's a slight awkward break right about here. So if there is one, simply go down to your timeline, insert a new keyframe. In this case, this will be that in between right there. And I'm simply going to nudge it over and down just a bit. Now moving forward, you can see it corrects. And there doesn't seem to be. There's another awkward break right here. So in this case, insert a keyframe, F6, and we'll move it up into its position right there. Moving forward, all the way to the end. All that looks really good. Let's go back. We can zoom out. Let's test our animation between both of those just to see what it looks like. Now that arm is moving into position really well too. With that done, let's focus on the glove. We'll go down to our forearm layer, lock it down, but keep the visibility. Let's turn on visibility for our glove and unlock it as well. I'm going to lock down my head just while I'm here. As we've done with all of the other ones, the first thing we need to do is to set our keyframes up from frame 161 all the way to 183. Next, let's go through and place our placement for each of the gloves. However, you'll notice by frame 177, the glove is going to swap to a different glove, and then when it reaches the end, it's going to swap to a different style glove as well. When that is the case, go over to our library and notice that there are 3 different gloves that we have in our library. Now we're going to be starting off with glove number 1 on frame 161, so we'll keep it there. So let's zoom in for this. But for each one of these ones, all the way up until that middle portion, let's simply move it into the position that it needs and rotate it as necessary. We want to make sure it makes good contact with the forearm and that it stays in position as well. Remember to move forward every 2 frames in order to set up this, even though you see your forearm is moving every single frame. We'll match that out once we start to do our motion tweening in between each one. So you can see here at frame 177, it's a different glove. So I'm going to delete away this glove, choose glove number 2, let's drag it on, and then we'll put it into position. Stepping forward to the next one, you can see this is a different glove as well. So we'll delete that away. We'll use glove 2, drag it on, rotate it into position. And then these last ones, this is not glove 2, so we're going to delete away this one. This will be glove 3. We'll drag it on and put it into position. With all of those done, let's go through and create our classic tweens. Select those keyframes, right-click, classic tween. Now we'll back out and we'll test our animation to make sure everything looks correct. Specifically, I want to make sure that it's matching up with the arm and the elbow for each individual one. So here I can see it's getting off just a little bit. If that's the case, simply select that mid-frame, insert a new keyframe, and then go in and move it or tweak it as necessary. So we'll swap it over to there. Moving back and up. Here you can see it gets way off because it's changing up with the frame. So we'll select it, hit F6. We'll kind of rotate this one down and back into place. You can see it transitions well. That one's off. So we'll insert a new keyframe there, F6. This one gets way off. So insert a new keyframe here. Select it and rotate it. Then it transitions out well for there. Now if we were to play it through, that's looking pretty good with that. The next portion we want to do is going to be the body. We'll go down to our glove and let's lock it down, but we'll keep the visibility on for it. Turn on visibility for the body. Let's unlock this layer and we'll go to keyframe 161. Now for the body, it's going to be pretty complex in that it's moving and changing shape almost every single keyframe. So the book is actually going to recommend that we draw this off frame by frame. We're not going to do any motion tweens. We're not going to do any kind of special effects to it. It's simply easier to redraw this off. Now to draw it, pay close attention to the details that make up this particular drawing. Essentially, you've got this shape that follows the shirt, and when the shirt goes down, notice that it's not necessarily tucked into the pants. So when you draw it, you can have it flare out. However, if you look at the rough sketch that's behind it, it almost looks like it's even with the pants. The main thing is we want to be consistent from drawing to drawing that we have. Along his neck, he's got a little collar, and notice that it connects in with the shirt by itself. So it should go behind the sleeve. That's what I'm trying to say. It's going to connect with the sleeve. There are a couple of wrinkles that you can add to this, and you can have things overlapping. All that adds to the believability of this three-dimensional form. So to get started now, we can go down to our timeline. Let's insert F6, a keyframe at frame 161. Then we can move forward twice to the next keyframe moment. And instead of inserting another keyframe, F6, we're just going to insert a blank keyframe. You can right-click and click right there. Then when we move forward 2 more frames, you can insert another keyframe, F6, and it'll automatically be another blank keyframe. So we want to do this for all of the future ones because we want to be able to redraw for all of these different parts. Now we can return to our 163rd frame and start to redraw the rest of the body, but having it match up with the head and the rest of the parts of the body as well. Now you can use any of the drawing tools that you're most comfortable with, especially if you wanted to draw with your paintbrush tool or even your pencil tool or with the paint regular brush tool. For me, I'm going to use the regular paint brush tool. This will allow me to draw off a line simply because I don't have my drawing pad set up for me. Now with that selected, I'm going to go over to my properties. I'm going to set my stroke to be about 3 points. So that's pretty good, about the same size as the other drawings as well. We'll keep the stroke color black, but I am going to change the width profile to be this third one that has the quick tapering edges. This way when I draw, it gives me that real world drawing kind of look and feel. Also, do make sure that you have object drawing mode unchecked, because we don't want to be able to have these automatically create objects. We want to be able to fill in any parts that are on the inside. From here, do remember to create full and complete drawings as you draw this. So if I was to draw the back, I'm not just going to draw one line here. I actually need to connect it up to what's to the shoulder up here at the top. So I'm going to click up here at the top and draw down. Now I know he's got this little part untucked here. You don't have to try to draw everything in one continuous line. You can break it up just a bit. And coming around to up here, if I don't like that, we can easily erase it. And then once I get up here to the neck, this is where he's going to have his little collar. Now his collar is actually a little bit thinner, so I need to swap up and make the size of my brush be a little bit smaller too. Maybe about 1 point in size. From here I can go back and let's draw off the top of the neck collar. And we'll draw off to this bottom portion as well. To fill it in, let's grab our paint bucket tool. With the paint bucket, and we want to pick out our fill color. And when you select your fill color, there's several colors that are already saved down at the bottom. We want to pick this fourth lightest blue. This blue is going to be slightly lighter than the shoulders or the sleeves of the blue that we have. Also, when you fill in, do make sure that you've got close large gaps selected. This way it'll close in some of the larger areas if it's not working for you. As far as his collar goes, that's going to be a different blue as well. If we go back, you can see his collar is that lighter, slightly darker version of the blue. So grabbing our paint bucket tool again, we'll go over to our tool options. Let's choose that second color swatch, this darker blue, to fill in the darker blue for right there. Now we can also turn on onion skinning to see our previous one, to see how it's moving from one to the other. So far, so good. But if you need to, you could back up and also add on any missing or otherwise details. For instance, I forgot this little fold that's right here. Keep in mind, if yours is off by just a little bit, that's okay. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. It's nothing I'm going to count off for your design. Let's actually make our brush a little bit larger, going back up to 3 points. But the main thing is I want you to draw off each individual frame. Moving back to the next keyframe, from here, we'll simply paint on and fill in each individual part. Now with each of those frames done, if I go back to replay it, you can see how it moves up into position. The only downside to this are all of the in-between frames. For instance, when I move from the first keyframe to the next one, you can see that the arm is going to start to get off, and it's going to get more and more off as he tends to move. So what we want to do now is to just go back and clean up some of those frames that are in between. We don't necessarily need to redraw everything. We simply need to make sure all the key points are matching up for his neck and for his sleeve that he has. So let's return back to keyframe 161 and then step forward to keyframe 162. You can see on this one that the shoulder and the neck are no longer starting to line up. So this is where we want to go in and make that individual adjustment just to that. So on frame 162, we're going to insert a new keyframe so I can edit this one, and then we're going to tweak these just a bit to make them line back up. We'll use our free transform tool, and if we zoom in, if you hold in between the lines, you can see how this will allow you to skew it. Now we only want to skew this upper portion, so I'm going to hold down Option as I click and drag over, and I'm going to hold Option as I bring it kind of down and into position there. So that will allow it to realign with this one. Next, let's move forward 2 more frames. So frame 163 is okay. 164, you can see where it's getting off again. The shoulder and the neck is what we want to turn on. So on frame 164, we'll insert a new keyframe there. This will allow us to edit this one. And with our free transform tool, we'll simply hold down Option as we click in between the 2 points, and then hold down Option to bring it down and back into alignment. Now you may have to tweak these ever so slightly, but we don't want to do any kind of drastic change between each one. We only want to have nice subtle shifts to give us a good transition. Moving forward 1, 2 more frames, that one actually works out pretty good, so I'm okay with that one. 2 more frames, you can see, aha, now this is starting to really get off as far as its position on frame 168. So take this one step at a time, inserting a new keyframe in between each of those, and then go through and fix the body as necessary. And the fastest way is to use your free transform, hold down Option, and simply drag it or scale it back in until it starts to move. Just make sure to hold Option so that it looks correct and only transforms the side that you need. With all of those redone, now we can test it and see that it's moving nice and smoothly. At this point, if you need to, you can always go back in and redraw or retweak any frames that don't look or look out of place. With that done, let's lock down the body. We'll still keep it visible, and let's handle the arm and hand and ball that's on the right side. We'll go back to frame 161, our original start. There's a sleeve, he's got an arm, and there's the hand. Let's deal with the sleeve first. So going down, let's find the sleeve that's on the right, which is almost at the very end. We'll turn on visibility for it and unlock this layer. And as we've done with all the other ones, we need to set our series of keyframes from 161 all the way to the end. Notice, however, as it moves, that sleeve will eventually disappear, so we don't necessarily need to animate every single frame. But we'll start off with frame 161. All right, from here we can see that the last frame that right sleeve will show up on is frame 169 before it's finally covered up by the right side of his body. Now, as we animate this out, we want to be able to morph the shape of this. So just like we did with the first right sleeve, we need to be able to break this apart in order to do the transformations. So before you do anything, going back to frame 161, let's right click on the sleeve and choose break apart so that we can now edit and transition each of the different ones. Next, go to the next keyframe, right click on it, let's break that apart. Once it's broken apart, you can then use your black arrow move tool to click on the little corners and have it move and change and distort into its next individual shape. Let's do the same for up here as well. Just bring that in. Go to the next keyframe, frame 165, right click on it, break it apart, then use your black arrow selection tool to move the parts of the sleeve right into position where they need to be. If they're off by a little bit compared to what's on the rough animation, that's okay. As long as it gets close to what we're looking for, that's fine enough for me. Let's see, we'll go through and let's tweak this one. There we go. Going to the next one. Just remember to break it apart each time by right-clicking on it. You can then click on the corners, drag it down, click on the edges, and place those edges where they need to be to match it up. And then finally, let's do the last one where it's hardly seen at all. Right-click on it, break it apart. From this entire thing, we can actually probably just move it downward, get that corner out of the way. I'm just going to bring up this last little piece here. Now, since these are all shape tweens, we can go through and select those keyframes, right-click on it, and do a shape tween. Next, we need to test out our shapes just to make sure that they flowed correctly. There's no awkward movements between the two. I can see there's a couple of them, for instance, like right here and right here. You can see the little scribbles where it's messing up. So if it messes up for you, Let's hit F6 and insert a keyframe in between both of those. And in our case, I bet we can use our black arrow selection tool to just delete away those little lines. So carefully clicking on it and just deleting it away. These are all minor lines. They're only going to show up just for one frame or two. Going to the next one. Those lines need to go away, so we'll hit F6 in between both of these. Let's erase away these lines. Now in doing so, it's leaving me a little white patch. So this is where I may need to get my fill bucket tool and fill it in with that particular blue, just to clean up that part. So now as it moves, it's moving forward. I see one particular part here I don't like. So I'm going to go here, select these lines, and finish cleaning up what you need from there. And before we move on, since the sleeve disappears after this last frame, we need to remove it from the timeline after this final frame on 169. So select frame 170, hit F6, and then delete to delete away all the contents, and that will clear it away and get it out of the way for future frames as well. Now we can focus on the right hand and moving the ball into position. So I'm going to lock down the sleeve layer and see if we can locate the right forearm. Here it is here. We'll unlock it, lock down that sleeve layer, and just as we did before, let's go through and place keyframes at all the points that we need. You can see that it's only going to be visible just for a few frames. So I'm going down. We got a keyframe right at 161. You can see it's only just a few frames. Then we'll go back and we'll reposition the arm as needed. As we did with the others, since we only did some simple movements, all we have to do is a simple classic tween between all of these frames. Also, like the sleeve, it's going to disappear after this last frame. So let's select this one and insert another keyframe and delete it away. Then we can go back and test for any movement in between. Since it's really minor, it's actually the easiest movement that we're going to do for this one. The final thing that we need to do for this section is move the hand as it moves up. So let's go down to our timeline. We'll lock down visibility for this, and the hand is located just above here at the very top. We'll turn on visibility for it, and we'll unlock that layer. Now there's a tricky part to this hand. You'll notice that the hand layer right now is on top of the body, and right now it's resting on his back above the body. As it moves, however, the hand needs to go behind the body, and then it's going to move up, and you'll see it just briefly as it passes by his head and then finally disappears up to the top. This means we need to have two different hand layers, one in front of the body, and then later we'll have one that's behind the body. Let's deal with the hand that's in front of the body right now. We can start off on frame 161. We'll insert a new keyframe. Then moving forward every other step, insert another keyframe for each individual time that it's moved. Notice that frame 167 is the last one before it starts to disappear behind his body. So that's the last keyframe I'm going to place there. Now, as we've done before, let's go in each individual frame and reposition the hand wherever is necessary. And now let's go back and add our motion tween. We'll go through and check each individual frame. It was a pretty simple little movement, so everything looks good for that. Now I'm going to select my last frame of the hand with the bomb in it. Let's go up to Edit and Copy. I'm then going to go all the way down at the very bottom of my timeline, and just above the right forearm, we're going to create a new layer. This layer is going to be called Hand Back. Since the last one ended on frame 167, let's select frame 167 on the hand back layer, insert a new keyframe there. Let's go to Edit and Paste in Place. Shift-Command-V will put a copy of that right on top of what we had before. Now as we move forward, we'll have a new ball on top of that. I do see one mistake that I made. I'm going to go back up to the very top where my hand is. Naturally, as it ends here, we need the next frame to be completely clear. So I'm going to insert a new keyframe and hit delete to delete away the contents. Now you can see the next hand that shows up as the baseball player moves will be the hand that's behind everything else, and we'll continue working on through here. Just as we've done before, let's step forward each time and let's place a keyframe wherever you see the ball in a different position. Now as it moves, you'll notice that this won't be visible every time. There's actually a few spaces where it's blocked by the body, but we still need to place a keyframe, so pay close attention to where that hand could be each time. Now we can go back and reposition the hand for each of these keyframes. Then we can go in and add our motion tweens. Let's go back and check each one of the frames. You can see as it goes up, back into position, and everything looks really good from there. Let's back out and test our entire loop from this point. That all looks really good, and let's do a final test of the entire movie. Going up to Control and Test. Here you can see the hand moves in, swaps it out, goes for the wind up, and then it'll explode. In the very last one, we're going to work through the bottom portion of the pitcher and animate his legs as he does the wind up.